For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel Franks and I'm the Coordinator of Scholarship here at the library. And it is such a treat to be with you here this morning to do a Fellows finding that is really very different from all of the other episodes that we've done in this series of public programs. Normally, we're in conversation with just one of our fellows, me asking questions and of course letting you ask all of your questions. But today, Dr. Michael Bennett, who is our 2024 C.H. Currey Memorial Fellow, is on location in Walgett. He's been doing his fellowship with the Dharriwaa Elders Council, and it's just the most magical thing that he will be presenting that research, looking through the library's collections in collaboration with elders towards an Aboriginal history of Walgett. So there's a fabulous presentation for you this morning. So it's wonderful to have your company. As always, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature. There's a little button with a couple of speech bubbles and a little question mark there on the top of your screen. And I'm going to come back and ask those questions in a little while. But now I'm going to welcome Michael, and he's going to introduce the elders that he has been collaborating with. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm just going to pass the baton on to Rick, who's going to give a local welcome to country. Thanks, Rick.
Hi, everyone. My name's Rick Townsend. I'm from Gamilaroi country. I'm born and bred here. Paying my respects to past and present, the elders. Also, there's Walluan and Neembar and Gamilaroi. Also, we'd like to pay our respects to all those elderly people, past and present and future. And let's hope everything's good for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And I thought we'd just sort of go around the table and get everyone to introduce themselves. And Ernie, starting with you.
I'm a member of the Dharriwaa Elders Council.
Hi, my name is Margaret Pallister, and I'm a member of the Dharriwaa Elders Group in Walgett.
Hi, my name is Sandra Thorne. I'm the chair or the speaker for Dharriwaa Elders Group.
Hi, my name is Betty Williams from Walgett. I'm also the secretary of Dharriwaa Elders.
Hi, my name's Wendy Spencer. I'm a non-Aboriginal person privileged to be working for the elders in Walgett, and I'm the general manager at Dharriwaa Elders Group.
And back to me, Michael Bennett. I just wanted to acknowledge the elders, thank them for the opportunity to work with you. I've got a long association coming out here for 10, 15 years, working on family trees, native title, all different sorts of things, but I really enjoyed this project. So, we're coming to you live from Walgett, the cultural centre at Dharriwaa Elders, Main Street of Walgett. Great setup that they've got here and we've had for a long time. It's only expanding as well, which is really great to see. So the whole idea of the fellowship that I had last year was to go into the library's collections and have a look at material there that relates to Aboriginal history, pastoral station records, old reports, church records, anything that I could find. And not so much to be able to tell the history of Walgett myself, the Aboriginal history of Walgett myself, which is a long and fascinating history, but to come back and talk with the elders and let them have a think about how they want to be able to tell that story. So it's a real sort of ongoing project that I'll certainly be maintaining beyond the just the year's fellowship. I think back to last year, I came out for NAIDOC Week, which is next week, and had a good chat and presentation, and the elders and some of the younger members of the community too were coming up with some really good ideas about how to tell stories going forward. So I guess some of the records that I'm looking at and that we'll be talking about today, divided into sort of two rough eras, going back to that early pastoral history. white fellas came out to Walgett like around the 1840s and stole the land, took the land. And so we're going to be talking about some of those records that they left, but then also some about the more recent records too, about the political activism of the Walgett community as well, which is continuing to this day through the work of the elders. But for this first, just give everybody an idea about where the work's being done. This is an old map from the Sparks family collection. It's showing the Barwon River, the Namoy River, and some of the big early pastoral properties, including Gingy, Woomba, some of these huge paddocks that the white fellas set up. And of course, right from the beginning, one thing we're talking about today is really relying on Aboriginal workers to work on this land. And I know many people, like Rick, you yourself, have got a history, and your family has a history of working on some of these properties.
Yeah, there's big history of a lot of Aboriginals working on properties, mainly just getting rations and slave labour, and just like properties to stay on. And yeah, it's a lot of droving, a lot of cattle, a lot of sheep. That's what they mainly done then. But it's changed a bit today. Anyway, Michael?
It's interesting what you say, Rick, about what people were paid. Another one of the records from the Sparks family that you can see.
Yeah.
This is from mid-1860s. And you can see up the top there, it just says, blacks. Of course, some of the language that was used was not really that appropriate. But, it's important to show these records. So this is a list here of some of the Aboriginal workers. You can see Combo, Charlie, Alex, etc. And they were being paid Combo got a pair of trousers and a shirt and boots and hat. So they weren't really, sometimes they were getting like maybe a pound or a shilling to share, but they weren't really paid. And, these properties were really dependent, like Rick was saying, on Aboriginal labour. But we'll draw your attention right down the bottom. You'll see one of the Aboriginal workers in the mid-1860s was this fellow called Rory. And that's significant because, Rory has descendants that are still here in Walgett to today. And Sandy, I know that your family has a connection going back to King Rory, as he was known as well.
Yes, it's on my husband's side. My husband, that would be his 3 times great grandfather. So on the Parker side. So that's a good history to know for my grandkids and my husband's side. So
But it shows.
It's shocked, but it's really looking because I was always told, or he was always told that she was the only child and we didn't know where she come from. So that's really good information, and I'm sharing information with my family, well, my husband's family now, so which is really good. Thank you, Michael.
Oh, look, my pleasure. But it also shows that this record's 160 years old, but it has a living presence that it relates to the community here today that have never left Walgett.
That's right. Thank you.
And early, like I know with the Walford side of your family, they had a connection out to Gingy. Have you had family members that have worked out there in the past? And
Probably did years ago. Like there's a elder now, Louis Beale. His family's from out there, and he told me a couple of years ago that there's a massacre out there at Gingy. Mm-hmm. They put all the black fellas in a cattle yard and just shot them. Mm-hmm. Kids and all. So there's a lot of history out there.
Yeah. A lot of sad stories.
Sad stories, yeah.
But I guess it's part of that truth telling as well to let people know that this is what happened on the land.
Yeah, that's right.
But going back to Rory, this is a scan from a book that published in like the 1870s, I think, that the library has a copy of, the State Library. William Ridley, he was a reverend that used to travel around, and he recorded a lot of the languages, Gamilaroi language, Yemba, etc. And one of the people that he spoke to about some of these stories is King Rory. So you can see King Rory there working on Gingi. And around the same time, there's William Ridley coming past, recording some of those old dreaming stories that are quite important and these are still stories that are held to today, I understand. I was wondering if anyone might like to have a little chat about the importance of, again, these stories to the community and how it relates to culture and things like that.
It was good to see a lot of the old stories and articles, dated back in time, when it's eye-opening now to just look at it and read, how it's all connected. So when, like, a lot of us, we don't know really what happened, we only just touch on certain bases of our life. But going back in time, that's really, really good.
Yes.
Good understanding. Yeah, we all connected.
Just be good though, just sitting down with the elders.
Yeah.
And they're telling their stories.
Yeah, fire bucket on.
Yeah, sitting around the fire bucket on the old woody.
Yes. Yeah.
Old fellas there letting their lingo go and,
And
I enjoy that.
even though this is written down, it's still very much an oral culture, I find.
Yes, it is. And like we teach our kids today, like when we're sitting around a campfire and we look up at the stars, they mention the Milky Way, like we talk about the emu in the sky and little things pointed out to our kids, our grandkids and great-grandkids, so which is like good history for them as well.
Now, I apologise. This is my attempt at photographing some of the records, and I will be asking the library to do some good scans, of course, down the track.
That'll be great.
Yes, and so that the elders can read this here. This is again part of the Spark collection, and it's a letter from R.H. Matthews. So R.H. Matthews, for many years, was a surveyor, and he used to travel around for the white fellas, marking out the property boundaries and, working out where the fence lines were and things like that. Later on in life, and he used to rely a lot on Aboriginal people because they knew the land, and that's actually recorded in this letter. It's a bit hard to read. Later on in life, he just gave up surveying and just went around recording, stories, Aboriginal cultural stories and things like that. He came out here and went to a lot of the old Bora ceremonies and met a lot of people. But this letter here was when he was still a surveyor. It's from 1872. And on the middle page there, he's saying, if you have a black fellow who knows the trees, could you spare him for a day or two? So he's writing to Edward Spark and saying, look, send someone who knows the land. And of course, the people who know the land are the Aboriginal, community members. Yeah, Rick, you we were talking about that before. Yes, that's the basis for the work that they were doing was that knowledge of the land. So and again, so that's recorded in R.H. Matthews' letters, which is great, a great source of information.
Yeah, they went away from sort of surveying. They just sort of done map reading on riverways, and that's sort of that's how they changed it. All the like Gamilaroi, Uluru, Nimbah, and they split them up like that.
Yep. And you see a lot of those pastoral station names are drawn from the local people and their language.
Yeah, the oldest one I know about is Wingadee Station.
Oh yes, where's Wingadee? I know sort of where it is, but you let everyone else know.
Wingadee is in between Canamble and Walgett to the left, in towards Pilliga, but not far from the Macquarie Marshes. And yeah, it's a pretty good area. I could understand why they all live there next to the river and whatever. And Wingadee, it's not far from Pilliga itself. And after they finished from Wingadee Station, they moved everybody down to Pilliga Mission. And then after Pilliga Mission closed, they moved them on to Brewarna, which was, I think, a different tribe, but yeah.
And Rick, that's part of your own sort of family's history, I think. You've got that connection down to Wingadoo.
Yeah, that's my family history through Wingadoo. Apparently, my grandfather's truck's still parked there.
I'll have to go and find it.
I might have to go and get it.
What sort of truck was it?
It's an old T model Ford.
Oh, good. That would be worth something now. Here's a photograph from Yingi. The Spark family had their. If you go back to that map that I showed at the beginning, down by the Barwon, where the Spark family had this house, and of course you can see we can see in this photograph a couple of young Aboriginal women who, and of course this happened across the nation, across New South Wales. A lot of young Aboriginal women were taken and ended up working
As servants.
as domestic servants.
Yeah.
That's a history I think that goes right through to, well,
My mother was one of the servants on Wingadoo Station.
okay.
Yeah.
And what sort of work did she used to do on?
Just to clean the house for the white folk and make it look clean, and a little bit of cooking, washing. Back in the old days with the old copper.
Hard work.
Yeah, stick in it, mix her up. Yes, I remember that, girls. Yeah.
A lot of them would have been like stolen generation and put into Cootamundra Girls' Home. Like our grandmother, she was one of them as well. And from there she got put out onto stations, how Ricky said early part. And with most of our, ancestors, they got billeted out, put on stations, worked. They looked after the white kids. They dressed them, fed them. Even when the parents, the mother couldn't feed them, breastfeed. Well, some of them, they used to breastfeed.
That's right.
And, it happened. And looked after him and that's where one of my grandmother, well, she was billeted out and then ended up out at Brewarna, one of the stations there, and that's where she met our grandfather. And from there they got married and moved to Walgett. But there's a lot of history of stolen generation in Walgett,
Yes.
in our area.
And it's a sad story, but of course it sort of began in different ways. The Protection Board got the legislation to remove kids in the early 1900s, but that process had been happening in different ways beforehand. And you can pick up this story as well from the Spark Diary out of Kingi. Here's an entry from 1876 in May, and it says Combo left with Jerome. So Combo, that's certainly it's one of the old Aboriginal section names. So Combo was an Aboriginal fellow who was working on it. And it's interesting, all these records that, there's always a little bit of a snippet here, a bit of a picture there, and you've got to try and pull all the stories together through, looking at the records, through talking to the community, etc. And Combo, I think, had an Aboriginal wife whose name was Caroline. And when the Spark family left Kingi, sold the property onto another family in the mid-1870s, they came to Sydney. And I think they actually took Combo and Caroline with them. And you can sort of see the entry at the bottom of the page there for the 29th, Friday the 29th of September, that it says Caroline died about 10:15 a.m. So it's quite stunning to find this, to see that Edward Spark had written. I guess it goes to show that she was obviously an important part, played an important role in the family. And there's another record I haven't scanned as yet too from the State Library, from the Benevolent Asylum. And just before she passed away, the Spark family had placed Caroline in the Benevolent Asylum. And in there she's known as Caroline Combo. at first I thought, well, maybe she was pregnant and was going to have a baby, but that doesn't seem to have been the case, that she was quite sick. I think with probably TB, tuberculosis, or some sort of disease of the lungs.
How old was she, what?
Not very old at all. That's a good question, Ernie.
Polio was getting around a fair bit at that time.
Yeah, that as well, all the diseases that used to impact on the community. So I actually, this is not from the State Library's collection. This is from the Deaths and Marriage Registry. But they actually recorded, it's pretty rare for these days, 1876, but they actually recorded her passing, and says Caroline, an Aboriginal servant, records her place as of birth as the Barwon River, so which makes sense because she's in the Gingy records as well. And the informant for the death certificate over there on the left, it says Charles Spark, friend. This is at the residence that the Spark family had in Sydney at Borkham Hills, where Caroline passed away. What friend means, we just don't know. What sort of relationship was there? But clearly, Caroline was involved in the family. And she's buried at Castle Hill Cemetery. So I did actually go out there. That cemetery's still there. I wandered around all the gravestones. I thought, oh, that'd be interesting if they had given her a headstone, but I couldn't find it. Mind you, a lot of the headstones were broken, so I don't know. But that's where she's buried there. But so it's a sad story. Poor Caroline's, like you were saying before, Sandy. Young Aboriginal women taken away. Sometimes they got back. Other times they didn't. And they're just, but you can still find traces of these stories through the records. Now, this is a photograph from the State Library's collection, and it's from the 19th century. They didn't quite record the year that the photograph was taken, but it says an Aboriginal burial in the Walgett district. You can certainly see features of the burial there. You can sort of see the poles, and there's a little bench.
Tree there.
Yep, scarred tree there too. So it's probably a burial of a fairly important person. But yeah, it's a shame they didn't quite narrow it down. But certainly I know of working and coming out here to meet with the elders group that protection of cultural heritage is a big thing for the group, and you have your Rangers program. And Bernie, understand that you were part of that Rangers program for a long time, and wonder if you could say anything about the work that was done by the Rangers to record sites or make sure sites are protected.
Yeah, we done some site recording. We visited about 10 or 15 around the Walgett areas. And we just maintained them and made sure they were safe a bit.
Yes. And I think the group has kept records of the location of those sites, just for your, I guess, not necessarily broadcasting that to the world, but you know where they are, so you can keep working to keep working to protect them. Look, as I said towards the beginning of my talk, one of the reasons that I've been coming out to Walgett for so long is to help the community sort of trace back their family trees. I was having a chat to Rick this morning, printed something out for you. It took me a while, but I got around to doing it finally. And I've done quite a few family history workshops over the time. And it was, I'm looking at a lot of birth, deaths, and marriage certificates. We saw one of those before, but church records too are really quite useful in helping to record family relationships. And there's obviously a very difficult history too between churches and Aboriginal people. But sometimes these records can be quite instructive. So this is some baptism records from Walgett in the 1890s, and the families were coming in. In this case, there were two families: the Pictons and the Tinkers. Ethel Tinker. They were living all out on Bundabarina. Now, someone might have to remind me. That's fairly close to Walgett. Bundabarina is.
Yeah,
It would be, yeah.
Collie Road.
Yep, out on Collie Road.
Bundabarina.
So there were families living out there in the late 1800s, probably again, domestic servants, pastoral work, all that sort of thing. There would have been a camp on the property. but the family have come in to baptise their kids, and this sort of helps in this record. Of course, helps to reconstruct all these family relationships, mentioning the parents' names, the children's names, and I think Sandra, Tinker. That's a name that you've heard of from around here.
Well, Tinker, it is well known to the Dennises and Murphys. Tinker, he was a king.
Yes.
So he must have been the king of probably that property. I really don't know. But his daughter, Ethel, well, she married our great-grandfather. So that was back in the days, and they legally married, but they had no children. But he raised the Dodds and all those families. So, yes. It's a small world when you look at it like that.
Yes.
But, yeah, I haven't got photos of it, but I was told by my grandfather, and I was told by a lot of the aunties and uncles on the Dodd side about the history of Ethel and Tinker.
Again, part of that living history. It's not just old dusty records in the library. It's
well, our mother, she was reared up by her.
Okay.
Yeah, Mum. And she lived at Kingley with them.
And what you know, the king plates. I know the library does have some king plates, but I don't think any of the king plates relate to around here. What's everyone's thoughts about?
No, there are.
Okay. Yes. Oh well, I'll have to get photographs of those. Bring them back.
I've got a picture of the Tinker one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that at the library or is that?
One of my cousins wore it, so I just screenshotted it, kept it, but I won't touch it. Yeah, that's taboo. Yeah,
I've seen one. I looked at, but I didn't hold it.
That's the same one.
The same one, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tinker.
Ducky Dennis got it.
Okay.
He said that's my family's, and I said, oh, I thought it was the Murphys. Yeah, and he said no. He said my family, but then they don't come from here.
Few families fighting over that.
Yeah,
Yeah, few families, and whoever got it, well, if they don't give it back, they're going to get sick. That's what we were told
Probably got a little
by
bit.
Pop. It's in the wrong hands.
Yep.
They'll get sick, and yeah, and it has happened when you think about it, eh?
it's scary.
And he's got it in his house. I seen it. He pulled it out and showed me. Oh,
You want to touch it?
I won't touch it.
No.
One of the ways that the property owners controlled Aboriginal people and
Yeah, put
caused
on them.
division today.
Yeah, just walked in and said, "Oh, you're the boss here. You know, you wear this. You're the king."
Yeah, they gave them the plate to look after that group.
Yeah.
They should have tried nothing.
Because it is the case that it didn't really reflect the way Aboriginal society is structured. We didn't have kings or leaders like that.
Just
The cockies done that.
the cockies gave it to the Aboriginal person where they sort of control the other Aboriginals on the land,
Probably,
on the property.
Like Wendy Fernandez, she even said at the group we had down there, then at the sporter, that her grandfather was a king. So there's a lot of kings around here. Hey.
Oh, rich ones are.
Someone was making a bit of money making all those brass plates. I think,
Yeah, hey.
Now, so we're going to jump forward a little bit now to some
Never know.
political activism that's taken place in Walgett. This year's the 60th anniversary of the Freedom Rides, and there was a big gathering just down the road earlier in the year for that. But what some of these records show that the State Library has, incredible collection, is that all this political activism just didn't start in 1965. That it was building for a long time before that. So this is a report, part of the Hannah Middleton papers from the Australian Aboriginal Fellowship, which was a prominent Aboriginal group back in the 50s. and that a local businessman had been writing into the Sydney papers and writing really disparaging, racist comments about the Aboriginal community, and the fellowship saw this and thought, well, we better go out and have a chat to see what was actually going on. So they sent a delegation out to Walgett in 1957. And you can read about some of their report here. They were speaking to local families, like the Lake families. Bert Groves was part of this organisation. He was a very politically active fellow going back to the 1930s and the first Aboriginals Protection Progressive Association. But so they came out here just to get some information. You can sort of see that many of the community were they wanted that citizenship recognition. That was one of the aims of the fellowship too, that pushed through to the 1967 referendum. But one of the things they mentioned here was the old welfare board exemption certificate. And that was, I understand, and it's mentioned there that people called it like the dog license.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Our father got one.
Yes.
And I remember back in the days, I was only a young girl and he used to work in town and a lot of other Aboriginal people, but no Aboriginal people was allowed to walk the streets of Walgett.
Yeah.
They had to meet down the Tommy Johnson corner, and they called that Crow's Corner. That's where all the blackfellas hung out. And that's where a lot of them went down there, and they made little fires. Or, women brought their feet up. They cooked it there for the husbands when they went back to work then. And that went on for a while. We still got that's at home, eh?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so it did, yeah. And on Dad's it, they went down to the nitty gritty.
What you could do and who he was.
Oh, yeah. So,
And did he have to carry that with him? Was that?
he had to carry it where he went.
They also had to have a permit to go in the pub
Yeah.
as well, where they had to show the permit before they were allowed to go in the pub.
Hmm.
And that was pretty strict, apparently. Yeah.
It was.
Only a certain amount of people, Aboriginal, got that.
And the cinema too. That was.
Yeah.
Yep, that was the same. Yeah, the cinema was the same. All the white fellas sat upstairs and all us Currey sat down the bottom.
Mm. And we had chewing gum
That's it.
thrown at us.
Yep, and everything.
Spat on and everything else.
Oops. So moving forward to 1964, and this is when things are really starting to probably heat up in Walgett, although I think it had been quite hot for quite some time. Because there was that story, it's not mentioned here, but those two young boys who were accused of stealing a couple of toys from out at the church fete and then sent down to Sydney and locked up, and they were removed from their parents. And certainly this is a report from the Aborigines Progressive Association from 1964.
Mm.
So there was that first Aborigines Progressive Association back in the late 1930s with people like Bill Ferguson, who ran that, and they ran the day of mourning protest in Sydney in January 1938. So that had lapsed, that organisation, a little while, but it sort of got going again in the 1960s, and some of the and I think one of the reasons, and they were in very close contact with the community here in Walgett, and you can sort of see down the bottom that Mr. George Rose of Walgett, so the Walgett community had formed their own chapter of the Aborigines Progressive Association in the early 1960s. And there's George Rose, who is
the founder of this organisation.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
And of the Walgett
And the Walgett
Service, and before
Athletic
that, the
Service.
branch of the Aboriginal Legal Service. Yeah, so,
Recognise.
a leader in this community.
so you can sort of see that his efforts are reflected in some of these reports as well, and that they've written in, and he wanted the badges, and they were quite active here in Walgett. Of course, then the APA, the Progressive Association, in late 1964, is in contact, partly through Pamela Beasley. She was a white anthropologist, but she was the secretary but she was then also in contact with Charlie Perkins and the Freedom Riders as well. So some of the information that's coming from George Rose, it's coming back to the APA, and then it's being fed to Charlie Perkins, and it's that situation that then leads in 65, I think, to when the Freedom Rides came into town. I guess everyone was pretty young then. Does people remember the Freedom Riders coming into town?
I was
Yep.
The board, yes.
I do.
Yes. What do you remember about that time, Rick?
Yeah.
You're pretty young.
Yeah, I was pushing the tyre.
In a photo.
It's in the photo, in a video actually of
Oh, yeah.
the Freedom Ride. It's at the end, just after they talked about the bore at Moree, because the Aboriginal kids weren't allowed to go into the bore unless they had to be washed or whatever. And they moved from there down into Walgett. And then they done a few video clips of the Walgett flat. They called it the flat, which is called now Uruguay Gundi. But yeah, that's where I lived, and that's where I was caught pushing the tyre.
That was a toy really for you.
Yeah, well, it's a toy, yeah. That's what we never had no Nintendos or anything. Like, you know,
Mobile phones.
we had to make our own bloody things. Like we had Riley pollers that pull along,
Yeah,
you know.
I remember.
We had to make our own amusement.
Yes. Well, the library has recently acquired some material from Jim Spiegelman. So he went on to become like Justice of the Supreme Court of New South Wales, but he took video footage, which the library now has and is just processing. So
It'll be on that then for sure.
Yes. Get copies.
Email.
Make sure to get copy for here, so you can all have a good look at that.
I've got the end bit
Yes,
of me pushing the tyre.
you've got that already.
I'll give you. I'll just show you. You're probably interested in seeing it anyway.
Maybe stand.
movie star.
Push play on that, and you can hear the Charlie Perkins talking.
Oh, okay.
Right.
There we go. Sorry, everyone. I'm seeing this myself, but
There he is, the star.
Yeah, I don't know how they got that, but anyway, they got it.
we might have to do a part 2 of this presentation. Maybe. Anyway, so this is the last slide. So this is actually post the Freedom Rides in August 65, and so what happened after the Freedom Rides, because that happened in February, but the Freedom Riders learned that there was that ongoing discrimination. We talked before about cinema and people being excluded from pubs and things like that. So they came back and decided to break the collarbone in the cinema, which was quite the confrontation involving Harry Hall and his daughters and others too. So and there's the report that is held by the library too in the papers of Pamela Beasley. But I guess the activism didn't stop then either. It sort of continued through. You mentioned before about in the legal service and the medical service, and then the history of Dharriwaa as well, because I understand it actually grows out of the medical service. Is that?
Yeah.
That's correct.
The legal service and the medical service.
Yes. Yeah.
And Uncle Ted Fields was also one of the founders of Dharriwaa Elders Group and was very knowledgeable about country and worked for national parks, one of the first Aboriginal rangers working for the National Parks Service. So they've honoured him over the years. And Mr. Harry Hall, who used to come here in his later years.
And his family's still very active as well.
And his family's still very active. Iris Hall mentioned there has been on the board of the Walgett AMS for many years and just recently retired from the board.
And Mary.
Mary is now the chair. That's right. Her sister Mary is now the chair of the Walgett Aboriginal Medical Service.
So I thought perhaps we could end. I know one of the main aims of Dharriwaa is bringing power back to the community, that you're sort of making your own decisions. And how has perhaps life changed here in Walgett in the last 50 years? Is it different? Is there positives and negatives?
Yeah, they still think, but
Yeah. It has changed.
very different as in they can walk around
Not for the
more.
better.
No, not for the better, no.
better.
It's getting worse again, I tell you.
But we weren't allowed uptown.
You have to work really hard for what you get these days.
Yeah.
Really hard. Because you easily be persuaded, set yourself in another direction. But there wasn't much educational right for the young people in the early days. And I was one of the lucky ones. I ended up getting an apprenticeship and successfully done that. So it's been meaningful for me, helpful for me. It's just made life a hell of a lot easier. And I just felt sorry for the people that were not given the opportunity to put themselves in a nice position that they should be in.
Young people up today would make it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
They're unbelievable.
They need a good flogging with a green stick.
No, they've got all
Well, we used to get it.
Yeah.
I used to get those, me, jug cord,
Just a few times with
you name it,
it.
whatever they could grab.
You're not allowed to do that now, though.
Nah, but that sort of kept me in check a little bit. But I was probably the worst kid in Walgett,
You were.
believe it or not.
Are you?
So later this month, we're opening our new youth wellbeing service and introducing a caring response for children and young people, trying to increase the services for children and young people so that they will be well and have a better chance of succeeding in life. And so that's the priority now of Dharriwaa Elders Group, while we keep our cultural heritage and other important work going. Prioritising starting up at this youth service and currently looking for support from government, because we're saying this is the answer. We don't want to hear politicians talking about youth crime if they're not investing in crime prevention.
They have to be on the ground that know everything about all what they're saying. You know, you just can't get it out of a textbook, you know, sit in a chair.
No.
You've got to be on the ground.
It's not one size fits all.
Yeah, that's it.
So the solutions are here and the solutions need to be supported.
That's it.
So I look forward to people in this audience today
Yes.
maybe keeping an eye out for our media stories.
Yes, yep. You can certainly follow Dharriwaa Elders on Facebook,
yes.
Twitter or X, other platforms.
Blue Sky, actually.
Blue
We've
Sky.
transferred,
Oh, you transferred to Blue Sky.
now
Okay.
to Blue Sky at
Yes.
the moment. Not sure whether that was a great decision, but
Yes. But certainly Facebook, there's lots of good stories that pop up there and photographs, and you can be in contact too. And if you're ever in Walgett, drop by.
Jump on.
Great historical displays, and hopefully some more information will be put up soon.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's pretty much the presentation.
I think you've done absolutely terrific, Michael.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's not just me, Rick. It's you and everyone else here.
That's good
for that. So
I like it when you dig deep.
Yeah, well, that's what you got to do. And that's the one thing about historical research, and Rachel, you would know that, and a lot of the audience would know that, is it never ends.
Nah.
There's always something else to something.
Rearranging the furniture, Wendy.
Yeah, I'll pass it a move in.
But anyway, look, questions, and thanks to everyone for listening so far.
Beautiful.
And thank you so much. It's been such a thrill to be sitting here, because I've been working with Michael for 12, 18 months now, just, supporting where I can. But he's always saying, oh, I'm off to Walgett, or I'm just back for Walgett, and I've done this, and I spoke to so-and-so, and always so excited. And so it's been really lovely to be able to hear your voices and see you and, have a much better insight of what's been happening in Walgett, as opposed to Michael dashing in and out and back into the reading room. And I found another thing. And that is actually the first question for you, Michael, is you've been working with native title and you've been working with Indigenous communities for close to 30 years. Am I allowed to say that?
25 perhaps.
Okay.
Yes,
But you're really familiar with these archives, here at the library and in other repositories. But was there anything that you found during your fellowship that kind of blew you away a little bit, that you were not expecting to discover? Because we're always looking for that holy grail, if you like, that thing in the archive that challenges us or fills a gap that we sensed was there but couldn't really do much about.
Look, it probably relates back to that story about Caroline as well, and going through that Spark diary and seeing Caroline's name, and then seeing that Caroline, that he wrote when she passed away. And I thought, oh, okay, that's it. That's sort of unusual that you would note that. It's very dry language, but the fact that it's obviously impacted on the family, Spark family, and they've recorded that. And then to see that then there was a death certificate recorded, and then to find out that, and I thank my colleague Paul Irish for this too, that she'd been in the benevolent asylum as well, and that all these sort of records came together to help tell that, what is a sad story. So it's around probably that point, just to see all these different records just relating to one individual, to you can sometimes you get lucky and find that material to help illuminate the life of someone, even though it's not the best illumination, but there's more there than I expected. So that's probably that particular one.
And regarding the collection, and this is a question more to the elders group, so I understand you formed in November 2000. So you had, I'm thinking, quite clear ideas about some of the things that you might have wanted Michael to find. And I'm just wondering what those conversations were like. Was it at the beginning, just find anything you can in the library? Did you have like a wish list of things you were hoping that Michael could find while he was here? And did your ambition for Michael's research change while he was doing it, as he was finding more material for you?
What did you hope that I was going to find?
All the things.
The family trees.
That personal information about it, yes. Yeah.
Really good.
I think that's very important.
Yeah.
And that, those baptism records, I actually haven't finished going through the baptism records yet. I might be in on Thursday, Rachel, to have another look. So, yes, you can see that the names are recorded and the surnames are recorded, and it just helps build that picture. You suddenly, that this family, were living on this property at this time, and they were coming into Walgett, and I guess that personal information helps illuminate your family stories.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's good to have that history behind us so we can share it with our kids, our siblings, our greats and whatever, because a lot of it, like, it's eye-opener for me anyway, but I see through Michael and through Melissa, sharing that information which I never seen before, especially about my own family and about Walgett itself. It's really, it's eye-opening and, makes sense, and it all comes together, but it's just like a puzzle. You have to, put it together. So, which is really, really good.
Well,
Well done. Yeah, well done.
Oh, and look, a shout out to Melissa Jackson, who's part of the Indigenous unit at the State Library, and for quite some time. She has monthly sessions, I think.
Yeah, fortnightly, I think.
Fortnightly. Yes, there you go. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's been running for a long time.
Yeah. Which is really good.
Yes.
And like we do have a lot of people from the community coming in as well, and discussing, you know, their family tree. They want to know their background because a lot of it, you know, as we mentioned before, stolen generation, and a lot of it is you can't go past that point, and our parents can't tell you much about it until, you know, that they adventure out on the other side of it. So, which is really good, and it's it's a really good eye opener. Well resourced.
We're also in our ranger team and our water and country work really interested in seeing the old maps and the mapping of the rivers. We're doing a lot of work to try and bring the rivers back to health, and there's a lot of very precious records, particularly considering the big fire that happened, which destroyed a lot of maps in early years. So the State Library's maps become even more important to us.
The big Crystal Palace fire in the Botanical Garden.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I think the Land Registry and the Australian Museum.
So much was lost in that.
Yes.
In that blaze. It's, devastating.
The language also that's recorded, the stories, that story with the language of the stars. It's really important information to then be piecing together with what's known here, and because this organisation's about keeping culture alive and living, and so we look forward to working with the State Library in the future, because we know the State Library has in its objectives to be providing a library service to the state of New South Wales. And
absolutely.
So we kind of see ourselves as a bit of a community portal into the library through this project.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Michael, you said that obviously your work, I mean, technically your fellowship came to a bit of a conclusion in December, but obviously we still see you here in the fellows room, which is terrific. How do you see your work continuing on this project? Because you did mention no history project ever ends,
Yes.
but you know, we do have to be selective and put our efforts and our energies into certain aspects of a history, or try and knock off one question at a time.
Yes.
So is it more family history for you? Is it more environmental history for you at Walgett? What do you see happening over the next maybe even 12 months?
Well, look, I mean, certainly the family history that continues, and it's always a matter of, you know, always learning more and putting together more information about particular families and the ancestors as well. That's a sort of a gradual process just to build the records and the names and put that information together. And that's not just from the documentary records. Of course, it's drawing on the community knowledge as well, which is very important to understand those kin relations, those family relations. So that will continue most definitely. You know, obviously still have an ongoing role with, you know, native title in the area too, which brings me out here. But certainly too, I think was one of the recommendations that came out from a year ago, and I did a presentation on what I'd been finding to DEG's board, but then to community members as well, is that sort of interest in, this is probably coming from the younger members of the community, but also digital ways of storytelling, whether it's on screens and people being able to, you know, touch and swipe and expand documents and have a good look. So
see that video of a young lad pushing a tyre.
Well, that's that'll be right up the front. Yes. So, and you know, look, that's I think to explore some of those possibilities as well. And I mean, DEG are already very good at telling your own stories, so and been doing that for a long time. But there's good possibilities ahead. So I will definitely be coming out here for quite some time to come, most definitely.
And he's done a fantastic job, and he's educating a lot of people, a lot of the community, which is getting bigger and bigger as you go through these meetings. And yeah, my hat off to Michael.
Oh, I really enjoy it, and I'm the one learning when I come out here, so appreciate the support.
I think Michael does collaboration and being guided as an historian better than a lot of people do. He's very patient, and I've noticed just him working with other scholars in the Horn Room, he will often wait and find out what people want rather than sort of overwhelming with, I have these 12 ideas, you need to pick 3 within 5 minutes, which a lot of historians do. And sometimes we just get too excited with what we're doing and the potential of what we might be able to do. But I think Michael is possibly the best person to, well, obviously we think he was the best person to do that fellowship, because otherwise we wouldn't have given it to him.
He's learned well from the Aboriginal people that he's worked with over decades now.
Absolutely.
So that's important.
It's good. And it's a good example for us.
Very good example.
Well, I grew up in Dubbo in the 1980s, so I knew a lot of Aboriginal kids then, and it was always had no sense of where they came from, like, or what their stories were. So it's been good to work with communities and just from my own understanding to learn more about the history of New South Wales and Australia. And it's, there's a lot of fascinating stories out there for communities to tell.
Well, on that note, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for being here this morning. It has been such a privilege for me and everybody who works with the fellows here at the library to be even a very small part of this project. So thank you very much. Next time, we'll be heading a little bit further north, and the always delightful Adele Wessel, who was our Merriweather Fellow in 2024, will be here. She's an academic and associate professor who focuses on history of the environment, and she has done this amazing project on the Richmond River, and she's actually flipped this story. So many of our histories are told through the mouth of the river, but she actually studies the river through its headwaters and where it starts its journey through communities and through towns and through this really amazing landscape that has changed so much over the last few hundred years. So that is Tuesday, 5th of August at 11 a.m. And you can go to the library's website and you can book for that now, and all of our fellows talks until the end of the year. So until then, I hope to see you on site or online here at the library. Stay safe, everybody, and stay curious. There's lots more stuff to find out.
Stay curious. Thank you, Rachel.
Rachel.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.